Okay, let's take a look at our shapes review sheet. So we can start off with our triangles, our different types of triangles, and if I have a triangle with all different side lengths, it's called scalene. We know we have 180 degrees in a triangle, as you can see in the notes. We also have an isosceles triangle with two equal sides and two equal angles, and it always helps to tick your equal things either with single lines or double lines. So that's isosceles. We then have equilateral, not drawn to scale, where all the sides are equal, not to get confused with isosceles, but equilateral, and again we know all angles are equal. And it just so happens that if there's 180 degrees in a triangle and we have three sides and three angles, they're all 60. We then have our right angle triangle, meaning we have a triangle with 90 degrees, and you can use Pythagoras for that triangle. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And then we have one last final. Well, there's combinations of triangles. You can have a right isosceles, for example, so there might be a combination, but one of the other methods we're going to use is similar triangles. If I take a big triangle and a small triangle within it, if the small side is A and the small side is B and the big vertical side is C and the big horizontal side is D, we know that the small triangle's vertical over the big triangle's vertical is equal to the small triangle's horizontal over the big triangle's horizontal. And as you can see the notes, I did it a different way, but all the same. So those are going to be our types of triangles and the things that we're going to be doing with them. We then have our four-sided shapes. So we have our square, and if we have all the same sides, we can call them S. And we know that area is equal to S squared. Area is length times width. And if it's a side, we can call it that. And the perimeter will simply just be 4S, or S plus S plus S plus S. Again, this is a review sheet. We're going to go through all the individual types of questions. But just taking a look at this so far. So there we have that. Now we have our rectangle with length and width. And some people use different letters, but let's go with that. And we know that area is equal to length times width. And perimeter is equal to 2 lengths plus 2 widths, or L plus W plus W. So I'm going to now get to the triangle. So if we have a triangle, we usually want to lay it with a flat side down, and we can call the base B and the height from the bottom to the point at the top called the altitude is the height. And we know that area is equal to base times height divided by 2. And we know that the perimeter would just be A. I'm going to call that side A. I'm going to call this side C. A plus B plus C. We then have our circle with a radius of R, and the area will be pi r squared. And the circumference, the length all the way around, will be, if we pull the 2 down in front, 2 pi r. Very similar to the formula directly above. So those are going to be our basic formulas, the formulas that we learned in elementary school. I am just going to minimize those a tad. Great, so now our more complicated shapes are three-dimensional shapes. So let's learn how to draw a cube properly. So we start off by drawing a perfect square. Then we identify 4 points in another square up to the right, and we draw that square. Then we connect the corners, the only way to draw a perfect square by hand. And if we have a side length of S, therefore all the side lengths are S. I'm only going to put ticks where necessary. We have a formula for the surface area. I would rather you lay it out flat, but each side length is S squared, and we have 6 of them. And we know that the volume is simply length times width times height, and they're all the same, so it will be S cubed. Okay, how about a rectangular prism? So let's do the same thing we did before and draw a rectangle, then draw 4 points, draw another rectangle, and connect those corners. And let's call it length, width, and height. Notice I did it differently in the notes, does not matter. The surface area will be, well, we have the area of all the sides, so we have length, width, plus width, height, plus length, width. But there's 2 of each of those. So the formula is 2 length widths plus 2 WHs plus 2 LWs. I'm going to shrink that up a tad. I hope you're writing a little bit smaller than I am, but I need to write large so it's clear. And the volume is simply V equals LWH. I hope that all your things are lined up. I'm going to move the volume formula a little bit off to the right so everything is all lined up, and I'll try better. So the formula for the volumes of these shapes, V, is actually area of the base times height. Because in the square, the area of the base is just S times S, which is S squared, times the height, which is also S. So S squared times S is S cubed. And the area of the base is in the rectangle is either length times width, or width times height, or length times height. It doesn't matter which one. The base will always be the base. And then we can just do area of the base times height. So you can either use the formulas that I've given you here, or just use the formula V equals area of the base times height. Both useful. Both are identical. Okay, let's take a look at a cylinder. So I'm going to draw 2 circles, and I'm going to connect, and I'm going to call the radius R and the height H. The height of the prism. A prism has to have an identical base and a height. And we have a formula for the surface area. Well, we know that we have 2 circles, and the formula from above for the area of a circle is just pi r squared, and we simply have 2 of them. And then we're simply going to add the area of the sides, which we'll go into more detail later in the notes, but the formula for the area of the sides is just the circumference, 2 pi r, times the height. Shrink that up a little bit. The surface area of a cylinder is 2 pi r squared, 2 circles, plus the circumference times the height. And the volume, as we just learned, is area of the base times height. Well, what's the shape of the base? The base is a circle. What's the formula for that shape? Pi r squared times the height. So we need to very much recognize how important this formula is. The volume of any prism, meaning it has the same base as the top, is simply area of the base times height. Now let's take a look at our last prism, a triangular prism. I'm going to start by drawing off one triangle, and then I'm going to draw another triangle up to the right, and then I'm going to connect the corners. And I'm going to call the base of the triangle B, and the height of the triangle H, looks kind of confusing, and the height of the prism capital H. Notice we are not using the slant height S in one of these formulas. So the formula for the surface area is, I don't want you to use that formula. I want you to lay out the shape flat and add up all the areas. So for the volume, it's simply V equals, we know from above, it's just area of the base times height. The base needs to be the same as the top, therefore the base is a triangle, and the formula for the area of a triangle is base times height over 2, and we have to multiply by the height of the prism. Be careful which one is your height of the prism. Okay, so those are going to be our basic shapes for surface area. I would much rather you lay the shape out flat and then simply calculate the individual areas of all the sides. And for the volume, I'd rather you just use the knowledge V equals area of the base times height and know what your basic shapes from above are. My scalene triangle from above, it just got messed up a little bit. That's okay. Okay, a couple more difficult shapes. Let's take a cylinder with a radius of R and a height of H and a slant height of S. And the formula for the surface area, SA, equals, now this takes some calculus. Eventually, first of all, obviously the area at the bottom, that's a circle. So that's just going to be pi r squared. And then we're going to add to it the area of the sides of the cone. And it turns out that no matter, it depends on the height of the cone, but if we have a steeper cone, we're going to get more of a Pac-Man shape. If we get a flatter cone, we're going to get more of a piece of pie or pizza shape. I may have gotten that backwards, but either way, the formula is just pi r s for the sides. And the formula for the volume, well, V equals just 1/3 of the thing above. So the volume of the cone is 1/3 of its respective cylinder. So it's just 1/3 area of the base times height, which is pi r squared h. And the more you understand the basics, the less you're going to have to memorize these silly formulas. Let's take a square-based prism. So I'm going to try and draw a square on an angle. I'm going to connect all my corners as best as possible. There's our square-based prism. And again, the formula for the surface area, you can look at the formulas, but I would rather you just lay the shape out flat and calculate the individual areas from the shapes from elementary school. And this volume is just 1/3 of its respective perfect square, cube, or rectangular prism. And V equals just 1/3 of that. So V equals 1/3 of the area of the base, which will just be length times width, area of the base times height. Now, this formula works for a rectangular-based pyramid and a square-based pyramid. And then our last shape, I need a little bit more space. Our last shape will be the sphere with a radius of r, and it's tough to draw a sphere. You kind of got to draw like a dotted line. I did a better job in the notes. Either way, we have the formula for the surface area, SA, and that will be 4 pi r squared. And the formula for the volume, I'm going to put it below because my picture is in the way. V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. And those formulas you'd absolutely have to memorize, especially for the surface area. You cannot lay a sphere out flat very well. So that is our review sheet of all the formulas that we need. And keep in mind, in big blue, all we really need is area equals length times width from above. Perimeter is just adding up all the sides. The area of a circle is pi r squared, and the circumference is 2 pi r. The area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. The volume of any prism is just area of the base times height. The surface area of all of the shapes, you can simply just lay the shapes out flat and calculate the areas using the formulas above. The formula for the volume of the cone and the pyramid is just 1/3 of their respective area of the base times heights. And usually, even all the way up to calculus, they give you the formula for the surface area and the volume of a sphere. Okay, now we're going to get on to working on through each of the individual shapes.